So let's get started. We're meeting here on March 15th, which is a very special day. If some people don't remember, 50 years ago today, Robert Kennedy announced that he was going to run for the presidency. And about 3 months later, as you know, he was assassinated. But that's not the only reason. It's also, as the first page here says, the Ides of March, which is March 15th, once for religious observance, but also arguably, potentially over the years, has become another example of fake narrative or fake news. Beware the Ides of March. That was the Shakespeare line about it. But even Shakespeare couldn't have imagined what happened to that phrase and that idea. We'd call it a meme today. The words really stuck, and what they did was they branded this date, which is not really about assassinations. It's about something completely different in the Roman context, with a dark connotation. And so whenever you see the Ides of March, it's usually a very spooky, ominous thing. You know, in the Shakespeare play, it was a soothsayer, fortune teller. It was actually a very non-threatening holiday. Calends, Nones, and Ides were the markers that referred to dates in relationship to the lunar phases of the calendar. But if you want to blame somebody about how this happened, you can actually blame Julius Caesar, who became the victim, because he was the one who changed the calendar. And he changed it just a few years before he was killed. And I bring this up because a lot of times we find that ideas, words, and phrases get repurposed. And that's part of what I'm going to be discussing tonight. They mentioned to me that I'm supposed to give you an outline. So this is the menu for this evening, not necessarily in this order. We're going to be discussing false narratives, selling big lies, confirmation bias. We'll discuss hoaxes and false flags and various operations in past history. You see them: Vietnam, Nicaragua, disinformation, smears, and psychological operations, PSYOPs. The Burster case is the Vermont example. I'll also discuss the Reagan era. Perception management, I'll explain what that is, and information war, and then we'll come up to the present day as well and discuss what happened in the last couple of years. And at the end, I hope to give you some signs of hope. We'll see how that works out. So let's get started. So my sense is that taking a phrase from Salman Rushdie's book that came out last year, the Golden House, that there is a broken relationship now with reality, he said last year. He was referring to the mood of the American people, the fractured mood of the people. And he created a comic book villain in his book who he calls the Joker, who might seem familiar to you, the person responsible for the break with reality. And that person, as you know, is Donald Trump, who, after turning national politics into what we might look at as a surrealistic satire, has used and weaponized fake news and facilitated it going global as a meme and also as a weapon. It's so effective today as propaganda that it's used as a propaganda tool by politicians and state media in at least 15 countries around the world. The phrase itself is used to stifle dissent and challenge real news. It's been one of the main rallying cries to justify crackdowns in China, Venezuela, Russia, Turkey, that's just to name a few. And it's continued in our country after the election through a series of misleading counter-attacks that cast anyone who's critical in the press as a purveyor of fake news. And hard as this is to believe, the people who are being accused used to be called the mainstream media. And this is not going to get better in the future, I'm afraid, particularly if the proposed merger, Sinclair Broadcasting with Tribune Media, goes through, because that will mean that 72% of U.S. households will be receiving propaganda over the television from a brazenly right-wing and propagandistic television network. Let's go back. Between 1941 and 1945, rules restricting channel ownership within radio and television were passed, and the objective there was to try to maintain some semblance of unbiased and diverse media. But that changed in the 80s, from 81 to 85 under Reagan, when Congress and the FCC began deregulating and the number of TV stations that one company could own was increased, first from 7 to 12, and then this continued with the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that was signed by Bill Clinton, and radio, which used to have a 40-station gap, that cap was removed, and it resulted in unprecedented consolidation. Clear Channel Communications, they went from 40 stations to 1,200 stations. Viacom expanded from 180 stations to 180 stations across 41 markets. In 1984, 50 companies, by many measures, controlled the vast majority of major U.S. media, and today we're down to 6. This idea of fake news and disinformation did not erupt suddenly under Trump. It was predicted years before.